Professor at the Faculty of Psychology at the Universitas Muhammadiyah in Indonesia. She's also on the CPCS board and is serving the board of directors for us. A scholar and activist who is keen and committed to integrating her scholarship and her activism into three main interests: social psychology of peace building, religions for just peace, and ecological well-being. So Yaya will be our moderator for this afternoon, and she will take us forward.
Thank you, Eric, for the introductions. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, peace practitioners and scholars. Here with us, already present, two outstanding peace practitioners. You already recognize them from their work and the news release, abundant news release on their work and the success that they have brought about in the Philippines and in Myanmar. Earlier, the keynote address by His Excellency Datuk Tengku Abdul Ghaffar has provided excellent base, excellent foundation for us to discuss more, debate more. And for this panel, the two outstanding presenters here will share with you the case study of Myanmar and the Philippines with Bangsamoro specifically. You have the bios of the two distinguished speakers in your folders, but I think I would still read them to highlight their achievements. The first one, Miss Nan Lahtaw. She's the director of Shalom Foundation, co-facilitator of Myanmar ceasefire talks, and technical advisor of ethnic armed organizations. As a member of the ethnic Kachin minority, trained in both the law and at seminary, she also initiated the Ethnic Civil Society Leaders Forum to broaden participation in the democratic transformation of Myanmar. She is a member of Action Asia Peace Builder Network and co-leads a workshop on gender and negotiations with Swiss Peace. She taught for 4 years here at the Masters of Applied Conflict Transformation Studies program with the CPCS. She earned her master's in conflict transformation from the Eastern Mennonite University in Virginia and served as a chevening fellow in 2008 at the UK's Birmingham University. It's not written in here, but I think she deserves to mention the award of N Peace Network for Peace awarded by the UN this year, 2015. The second resource person would be, I would call him Ustad. Ustad is those from Muslim communities understand what does it mean by calling Ustad. Yeah? The highest regard that we give to religious scholar, leaders, and teacher. So Ustad Dr. Abhoud Syed Lingga. He is the executive director of the Institute of Bangsamoro Studies in Cotabato City, the Philippines. He holds dual master degrees. One is in Islamic studies and another one is in education. He's an associate professor at the Mindanao State University and a lecturer at Cotabato City and also in other numerous universities and colleges. His research interests are in Bangsamoro self-determination, conflict management, human rights, sustainable development, and Islamic education. As an accomplished author and writer, he has published numerous book chapters and articles in local and international journals. In 2010, this is the most relevant one, I think, why he's here to share with us. The Moro Islamic Liberation Front, MILF, invited him to be a member of the MILF Peace Panel for negotiating with the government of the Philippines. So ladies and gentlemen, the first turn would be for Ms. Nan Lahtaw. Each presenter will be given allocation of time of 20 minutes, and then your participation will follow. Please, Ms. Nan.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, fellow peace builders, friends and friends. First, I would like to thank CPCS for inviting me to be here today. They have been putting their efforts, being very patient to organize my travel schedule. So thank you very much to the office team to get me here. Actually, this time, I arrived to Siem Reap by plane. Back in 2006, I think only those who have been around in 2006 with CPCS would know this joke. As I was coming back from Penyasastra University to my hotel in Phnom Penh, I asked the tuk-tuk driver, I would like to go to Angkor Wat from Phnom Penh. That was my mistake, it was my first time in Cambodia, and I mix up all these names, and actually I think I want to go to Wat Phnom area, but I think I mistakenly said, okay, I want to go to Angkor Wat. I think I was with Daka Ibrahim that time. So that was back in 2006, 2007, when Nyein and I started teaching at X course in those days. So glad to be back to this. This is my first time at the Peace Practitioner Conference, but I've been always in touch with the CPCS and X students. So thanks again.
That's special welcome music.
Special welcome music, okay. Should we be dance? Okay. I think there is a lot to cover in 20 minutes, but I try to be brief, and if it is not, if you have questions, probably we can do more in the Q&A if there's time. As I was thinking about my presentation for today, it is actually, by reflecting the conference, this is a reflection of the peace practitioner in the Asia region. So I was reflecting what I did and what I have been doing. And I'm sure most of you sitting here in this room are peace builder and workaholic, and not realize we are, almost end of 2015, But I think probably we still don't remember that we are coming to the end of the year. So just, I think we should all look forward. As a peace practitioner, we should also be looking forward to holiday season, after this conference. So looking at the current Myanmar peace process and political context, there's a lot to talk about, but I will try to be brief. And as you already are aware, the current government had been negotiating with the 21 armed groups. But among the 21 armed groups, and recently, in the last 2 years, the ceasefire negotiation process, 21 armed groups, particularly 18 groups who are in the negotiating with the government, were able to transform the process. Because the recent government, their initiative to peace process was through the bilateral approach. They will talk bilaterally to the individual organization, individual armed group. But the armed groups, 16 groups in the beginning, come together collectively and negotiated back with the government that we will no more negotiate bilaterally, we will only negotiate collectively. So since then, to make a story short, since 2013, 16 groups started with 16 groups, collectively started to negotiate with the current government for the ceasefire agreement. So out of that 16, later there were 17 groups. It's very confusing, okay? So let's just make it 21 groups, yeah? Out of 21 groups, because there are different categories by face. So out of 21 groups, currently, in the October 15, 8 groups had signed nationwide ceasefire agreement. So there were much criticism. The title of the agreement is called Nationwide Ceasefire, but not all the 21 groups have signed. So how can we call nationwide ceasefire? Because there are active conflict going on in many parts of the countries, while the ceasefire have been agreed with some part of the country. So this is in this situation, one thing that we also need to keep in mind, the complexity of the conflict is Myanmar, particularly ethnic armed organizations, share border with China, India, and Thailand. So in Myanmar current ceasefire process and the peace process, one thing that we always have to keep in mind is the regional dynamic. The armed groups and government share the border with China, India, and Thailand, and Bangladesh as well. So this added additional complexity when we talk about designing of the peace process of Myanmar. So let's go to the current peace process, the current political context. As we all know, November 8th, after the election, the NLD party won the elections. So we all hope, NLD party will be in the new government. And in the new government in 2016, starting April, new government will be in place, and new government will continue with the peace process. So at the moment, everybody is wondering and everybody is waiting what the new peace landscape will look like after new government came into administration. So therefore, at this moment, during this transition, still people are waiting to see how the new government will take initiative on to continue to carry the peace process. Again, just to be brief, out of the nationwide ceasefire agreement, there will be two parts, two parallel processes will be emerged. One is, as part of the ceasefire agreement, there will be ceasefire monitoring. So that it has its mechanism to continue with the monitoring. But on the other hand, as a result of the ceasefire agreement, there will be political dialogue. So the gist of the NCA agreement that the signatories and the government have been saying, what are the main factors, main points reflected in the NCA text is the narrative that you never heard before. For example, number one achievement from the government side is, commitment from the government side is, government had agreed in the NCA, Nationwide Ceasefire Agreement text, government had agreed to establish genuine federal union based on the political settlement. So that was the big achievement, big commitment for the government. Because those who follow Myanmar history, the word federal is very touchy words and very sensitive during the military regime. Never talks about it. So when this new government, during the peace process, I remember at the peace table, some members from the government panel were saying, oh, I was the one started to talk about the federal. And another one said, oh, I was the one started to mention about the word federal. So even among the government peace panel, they wanted to take credit, okay? Who started using federal words comfortably in the government? So anyway, out of NCA agreement, government agreed to establish federal union, genuine federal union based on the political dialogue process. So political dialogue will be going on hopefully, not even started yet, so it will be a long process. The second key elements that government also acknowledged and big commitment from EAO is, ethnic armed organization is, ethnic armed organization agree not to disintegrate from the union. So they will not talk about independent, but they will stay within the union. So that was another big commitment in the NCA. The third commitment is current government separate between government and the military. So military has another entity. So military, the commitment from the military in the NCA text is military agrees to address the current ethnic armed conflict not by military means, but by the political means. So they commit themselves to involve in the political dialogue process. So these are the three main aspects of the main commitment, big commitment from the three main stakeholders in the negotiation process. So as some of you may also read in the news that according to the NCA roadmap process, peace process roadmap, after NCA is signed, it has to be ratified by the Union Parliament. So just yesterday, Union Parliament, this government, at the Union Parliament, nationwide ceasefire agreement was ratified yesterday. So this is also a big achievement. But at the same time, there are major concerns as only partial ethnic armed organization had signed the ceasefire agreement. So out of 21, only 8 groups signed. So where's our met? The 13. 13 still remains. 13 still need to be on board or to be able to agree on the NCA agreement. So one thing that we have to keep in mind is NCA, during the NCA discussion, during the negotiation process of NCA, the political landscape is different from the NCA implementation period. So during the NCA process, the political landscape is all the ethnic armed organization will be able to participate and sign the agreement. Then all-inclusive political dialogue will begin within the given time frames of the NCA. But now we are in different landscape. And in that different political landscape, NCA agreement is implementing at the moment. So the different political landscape that I mentioned here, that new government will be in place in 2016 April. But at the moment, the new government is not fully on board on the implementation of the NCA agreement. Because right after the NCA agreement, within 60 days, we need to have a political dialogue framework finished. So the political dialogue, according to the timeline, next Monday, December 14, is the 60 days after the signing. So signatories and government and political parties are working to achieve, to finalize the political dialogue framework by 14, next Monday, without the participation of the 13 armed groups. And to my observation, sitting in the room, the representative from the winning party, from the NLD, is in the room during the framework discussion, but they are in the room, but it's not, to my observation, they are not actively engaged in the political dialogue framing process. So I think these are the challenges that we have to bear in mind, why the signatories, both government and ethnic armed groups, beginning to implement the NCA agreement. So this is just to show. How do I do this? Sorry. You may on the blocks in the green color, lighter green and the darker green. I don't know how this pointer works. No. Because I want the. So anyway, so 8 armed groups had signed, and their position now is to continue to lay the foundation for the political dialogue process with the current government. But non-signatories, ethnic armed organization, their position, to my observation is, their position is we will wait to dialogue with the new government. So the question is how actively the new government will be initiating the peace process or political dialogue process, whether the peace agenda, political dialogue agenda will be the priority agenda for the new government in the 2016. So that is still the question. So that's why I said now is wait and see moment. I don't want to say split between the armed groups. It's not split, but it is split. Both 8 group signatories and 13 non-signatory groups are trying to come back together so that they would put all their unity in one basket. So I think that is also another layer, another complicated layers added to the current process. Up till the signing of the NCA in October 15, all the armed groups, at least 18 groups, were together, collectively negotiating with the government. So now part of the armed groups are with the government, already signed, and part of the 13 groups are not on board yet. So this is another layer to the peace process that we need to continue to build relationship, continue to find common platform to come together. So this is the Myanmar language, which is 3 and 4, but I don't need you to understand the whole thing, but I just would like you to look at that symbol. 3 and 4 is opposing to each other, right? So like those who are familiar with riding on the trishaw, like you have to sit opposite to each other. So at the moment, armed groups, the 8 groups and 13 groups are trying to get together. I just came from the Chiang Mai, and 13 groups are also working how they can initiate conversation with the new government and how they can have a conversation with the 8 signatories. Particularly without the participation of the 13 groups moving forward, according to the timeline of the NCA to draft the political dialogue framework, to begin the political dialogue in January 14, 2016 will be, I think it will be quite difficult, because this morning we talked about ownership. Without the ownership of all key stakeholders moving forward, the political dialogue will be very unlikely to be successful. So that was my brief about the political landscape. But reflecting on the current process, and particularly I'm reflecting as a peace practitioner, what do we do in the current process in Myanmar? So at the track 1, of course, at the moment is still ceasefire negotiation. And the role that myself and my other colleague involved at the track 1 as a facilitator, and we provide the technical support, and I will talk a little bit more about it. And track 2, as you also read in my biodata, that civil society from nationwide, we had come together every 3 months to create this informal space among the civil society. The concept is, in the peace process, only the people participate, this process will be sustainable. So this is a concept that we're trying to implement in Myanmar context. So only in this government stage, we were gradually able to lobby and gradually able to broaden civil society participation in the peace process, even though it is not as much as we would like to see, that we would like to participate. But at the moment, it is recognized that there is a civil society forum that meet regularly that represent civil society from across the country who are supporting the peace process, who will be supporting in the upcoming political dialogue through different means. So we do advocacy to the parties sitting at the peace table for all different issues. All the concerns came from the grassroots, and all the issues that raised at the forum to be taken into consideration during the peace talk. So that is also one layer that There are many active civil society practitioners in the country who are involved in that civil society forum. Another area at the track 3 level is, we would consider that is on the grassroots. This morning, some colleague also asked about the ceasefire monitoring in Myanmar. Yes, in the current peace process, in the current NCA text, the monitoring mechanism is already set up. I mean, it's agreed. The TOR has been agreed for union level monitoring committee, state level monitoring committee, and regional level monitoring committee. But in the NCA text itself, ratified by the parliament, indicated the role of the international in the monitoring process. But in the actual negotiation, the participation of the international either institution, international expert, are still very limited. And there is, at the moment, there's no formal role for the international in the ceasefire monitoring. But again, from the concept of the people participation in the peace process, we are also advocating to have a civilian cease monitoring on the ground. So I think at the moment, my colleague Nan Lahtaw had been sitting in the committee and negotiating and explaining to both parties, both military and the armed groups, the role of the civilian ceasefire monitoring and how the civilian ceasefire monitoring mechanism can be linked to the official mechanism. How can the civilian monitor can be supportive to sustain the ceasefire? So this is also another area on the grassroots that is taking place in Myanmar, and we have been learning a lot from the Philippines as well on the ceasefire monitoring, but we're adapting to our context. So those who are sitting in the room are also involved in that aspect as well. One particular area that I would like to highlight as a peace practitioner involved in the peace process is a facilitator role. It is different from the international practices, and Myanmar, we have our own way to design our peace process and to lead the peace process. So the person sitting next to me is from the government side, and I have been technical advisor to the ethnic armed organization, to the collective group. So I was also assigned as a facilitator 15 minutes before the actual talks begins in the first talk. So that was back in 2014 actually. As we were coming to the room, and one of the team leaders of the ethnic armed organization, Badu Gwaituwen, asked me 15 minutes before the talk, Janan, can you facilitate? Can you be facilitator from our side, you know? So, all right, okay. I had facilitation experience as a civil society, not at the official meeting like that, you know. So that was my first experience as a facilitator, as insider partial facilitator. It was very tough being a facilitator and view as you are from you represent armed groups, you know, like you are nominated by the armed groups to facilitate. So how can we trust you? You know, so that was, I felt that was the look that I got from the other side of the table. I think we have to gradually build that relationship and build that trust through building relationship, you know, through informal discussion and things like that. So I'm sure those who are in the room and in the X-course have studied about the insider partial mediator role, but our role is insider partial facilitator. But my challenge is, how can I be impartial in my facilitation? Why I am insider and why I'm partial to this group? So that was the very challenge. As I mentioned before, in Myanmar peace process, there is no external third party. From both sides, each side nominated or identified one facilitator from each side, and then we co-facilitate it, and we have our own way. But throughout the 2 years of facilitating experience of the ceasefire talk, I think facilitator can do a lot. We can influence the designing of the talk process, and also, of course, as a role of the facilitator, we can influence the process during the talk. We can guide the process, we can lead the process, but it is tough without being seen as I am biased to the armed groups that I've been nominated to facilitate. How do I behave? How do I choose the word that I would say? How do I say? How do I phrase? So those are the very challenging factor as a insider facilitator, but how do I facilitate impartially the process? It was quite challenging. So one thing that I try to overcome, I try to be mindful about myself when I'm facilitating. I need to be objective. I shouldn't be emotional about during the facilitation. I have to be objective, and I have to prove that I'm technically strong, and the way that I do things are technically strong. And also, as I mentioned earlier, how do I communicate to the team that I represent during the talks? Particularly without seeing that I'm biased. So how do I phrase? For example, knowing one of the head that I'm wearing is technical advisor to the ethnic arm organization, and knowing what we had prepared for the talks, and knowing what they should be saying for that particular issue, when they are not saying what they had prepared, what we had prepared for them, I started to get itchy. How do I get them to talk what they are supposed to say? So without being seen that I'm biased, I have to be transparent in my way of facilitation by saying, by addressing, okay, from the government side, do you have anything else to say on this issue? From the ethnic armed organization, do you have anything else? So I may have to repeat a couple times, so that they may remember what they have to be saying. So I have to use different tactics. Without me bias on the process, how can I still communicate to the team that I had give advice to, how they can get back to the table? How can they say what they should be saying without interfering them as well? Also, I always have to put extra effort, and I have to be mindful about building relationship with the other side. So at the technical level, also with the negotiator from the government side, I have to put extra miles to build relationship, to approach to them. Of course, by culture of military generals, they don't really talk, and they are not very good at personal relationship. They don't associate with people. Even when they eat, they would eat separately. So during lunchtime, during break time, we have to go and approach them, say hi, and started to build relationships. So that is the extra mile that I have to put. And also, I have to realize that as a facilitator, we are not a decision maker. It's also reflected this morning by the keynote speaker, that we are supposed to guide the process. And last thing is not to overdo. As we facilitators, sometimes we like to paraphrase, we like to summarize. Yes, summarizing, paraphrasing is good, but at the talk with the generals, particularly with the uniform, they get impatient when you summarize, when you paraphrase. We know these things, I was scolded literally, actually. My first facilitation, at the first talk, I was trying to paraphrase because knowing ethnic armed organization didn't really get what was the last discussion. So I was trying to summarize, but the generals from the government side said, you don't know the stuff, we know our stuff, we prepared this and you don't know the stuff, so you don't need to paraphrase, you don't need to summarize, But knowing there is a need to do this, but I have to watch the political, I have to watch the atmosphere, how much I should do the paraphrasing, how much I should be doing summarizing, by looking at, okay, I think maybe this one they got it, maybe that one they didn't get it, so. But sometimes we just have to let them talk, and we stay quiet. Particularly this photo, Abhoud Syed, he is the General Secretary of the KNU, Karen National Union. We were facilitating the Ethnic Armed Organization Summit, 21 groups meeting, which was not easy. This photo was during the discussion of the all-inclusive. Because government said, no, we cannot accept 5 groups to be part of the nationwide ceasefire agreement. We can accept only certain groups. So ethnic armed organization were trying to find ways how they could overcome, how they could find strategies. So we were facilitated a 6 days long meeting. So this is the end of the last day. And it went on and on, they came back to the same story, even though we finished previous day, they came back because they still cannot accept the discussion, the decision that was made among the armed groups. So it kept coming back. So at the end, Abhoud Syed, I decided, okay, let's just let them talk and let them guide the process. And after they go around and talk, and some active participants said, okay, I think we had discussed this issue yesterday, the day before, I think we should move on. So at that point, we pick up the process again. So depending on the topics, depending on the dynamic of the group, sometimes in our facilitation, we just let them talk, and then when it comes to the right moment, we pick it up again to continue with the process. As a role of the technical advisor, sometimes some civil society friends are saying, okay, where is the space for the civil society in the dialogue process? Are we a decision maker? Are we going to play in a decision-making role, or are we going to play in a supporting role? So that has been always debate among the civil society. But as a technical advisor, as a civil society, I do believe, even though we are not decision maker, by being a technical advisor to the ethnic armed organization, we are able to influence to the negotiator. Because unlike this morning, what keynote speaker said, actually technical advisor from both sides draft the text actually. So so during that drafting process, as a technical advisor, we could insert our opinion, we could insert the technical aspects in the drafting of the text and also drafting of the agenda, and we could put our opinions in that. In Myanmar context, since the drafting of the nationwide ceasefire agreement is what we call a single text approach, both sides bring their document in the beginning, and then we put those 2 texts into one single text. So during that single text process, the 2 technical teams from both sides, at the end of each meeting, we have to work together. At the end of the day, we have to clarify the meeting notes, we have to clarify the changes in the text. So in Myanmar context, the 2 technical teams from both sides have to have a good team spirit, and we have to be, as I mentioned earlier, objective, and we have to be technically strong. So I would also like to acknowledge the technical team from the government, Myanmar Peace Center colleagues are also very technical and also very objective in terms of the drafting of the text. So we have, at the end of the day, after the talk, we always have to sit again between the technical team to compare notes and then to make sure that we all understand correctly. So therefore, in our context, developing professional relationship with the technical team from both sides is also quite essential. And that also includes that the teamwork is quite essential, because in the beginning, yes, you represent one side and then another group represent the other side. And we want to compete each other, you know, you represent them and we represent this. But at the end of the day, we realize we have to work together. Otherwise, to support the peace process with different opinions, different process will be very challenging to come into one process. So therefore, developing the personal relationship and also professional relationship with the technical team from both sides are also quite essential. So I would conclude my presentation with that.
We are fortunate because Janan has given us most recent updates. She just went back from the negotiation yesterday, yeah, and we, from her presentation, we have a very rich nuances of experience. From I can pick from her presentation is that it takes a lot of skills and wisdom and also strength, the emotional intelligence to be a facilitator that combines the interpersonal skills in professional setting. It's challenging and it's also inspiring. I know that you have a lot of questions and comments, but please hold on to that. We need to listen to Dr. Abhoud's presentation first, and for you to find the commonalities, the differences, and the contrast between the two innovative peace processes in Myanmar and in the Philippines and Bangsamoro.
Thank you. At the outset, I would like to thank CPCS for inviting me here. I think we were fortunate that I was able to come today. I know that several times in the past, Emma had trying to arrange my participation in various activities with CPCS, but unfortunately, those activities coincided also with the negotiations in Kuala Lumpur, so I always miss that. Actually, I am the youngest, not because of age. Don't think about the age. And the youngest member of the MILF peace panel in terms of duration in the service of the peace process. And because of that, when Haji Murad asked me to join the MILF peace panel, I was so hesitant because I thought, what can I add more? At the time, the peace process was already in its 13th year. But with his prodding and with, of course, the advice of my family and my friends, then I cannot say no. But fortunately, probably by coincidence, in my stint with the peace panel, it was also at this time that the major agreements were signed at the time that I joined the panel. The consensus points, the framework agreement on the Bangsamoro and the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro were signed when I was in the panel. I know that I have no added value there, but personally I feel satisfied. As Emma would testify, I had contributed less in the negotiation because I talk less. Because the rule is only the chairman can talk unless you are authorized to talk. So I see to it that the chairman seldom called me to talk. Now, however, what I will share with you today are my reflections, not only as a member of the peace panel, but as an observer, as a student of the peace process, which as early as 1975, I was already following up. What I can do today, with the 20 minutes allotted for me, is to go directly to the reflections that I have. I know that many of you, if not all, are already familiar with the Mindanao peace process, so I will go directly to what I think might be useful in encouraging other armed groups and governments in the region and in the world to settle their conflicts not through armed struggle, but through negotiation. Now, at first, we have to encourage the conflicting parties to negotiate. It is not easy. I know it's not easy. In the case of the Bangsamoro and the Philippine government, we are very fortunate because during when Ustad Salamat Hasim, the founder and first chairman of the MILF, made a policy statement which he said that the only peaceful and civilized means of resolving the conflict in Mindanao is through negotiation. And that policy statement was being followed by the present leadership of the MILF. On the part of the government, as even during the time of the dictatorship of Marcos, until Ramos, they had already a policy of trying to negotiate with the armed insurgents. So we are fortunate on that aspect that it was not very difficult to encourage armed groups to negotiate. But for other armed groups that may be hesitant, we have to make them to realize that negotiation is the preeminent approach to resolve conflicts, and that military approach does not only fail to resolve, but in many cases can even fuel conflict. This, I think, we have to emphasize to both governments and to armed groups. But there are armed groups who feel that they may not be at par with government in terms of negotiation. In cases like that, we have to see the capacity of conflicting parties to negotiate. As this is not about the legal or moral basis of the parties' grievances, but the nitty-gritty of negotiations. It is easier to draw to a dialogue a party who feels confident of its capability to negotiate. On the part of the MILF felt confident in negotiating with the government, despite of, government has all the facilities of all the technical support. It's mainly because the MILF drove outside from its membership some technical people that can help them. Many of the members of the MILF Peace Panel, for example, are not members of the MILF, but they are outsiders whom they thought that can help them in the negotiation. So, armed groups who has the capability, who has the sympathy of many people, of some people, can draw in some technical support and technical advice. It will be very difficult for armed groups just to limit their own, just to draw support within its rank, because they have there are limitations for that. So that's, I think, we have to encourage armed groups to do that. Now, another issue is how do we start the negotiation? In the case of our experience in Mindanao, it is helpful to start the dialogue with no preconditions. This made the start of the talks between the government and the MILF in 1975 and then the negotiations between the government and the MILF in 1997, very easy. There was no conditions about flags and other symbols, because sometimes armed groups and government would insist, okay, we have to display our flag. The government would say we have to sing the national anthem before we start, and this will be very destructive. What is important is we can do away with all these symbols. We go directly to discussions of the substantive issues, because sometimes the symbols, although important to some groups, but they can be they can hinder the progress of the peace process. Now, there's a problem. Now, the next issue is during the negotiations. It is very important that during the negotiations, the parties have the same appreciation of the problem. If they have different appreciation, then it will be very difficult to continue the dialogue. On our experience, we have been discussing with government for many years, but basically there was no progress because there was no same appreciation with the problem. One, for example, government would insist that the problem is about poverty, about neglect and discrimination, but the armed groups would say no, the problem is, this is a problem of self-determination. So if this cannot be resolved and you will not be talking on the same level, then you will be prescribing different solutions which may not be acceptable to both parties. So it is very important that parties have the same appreciation of the problem. Another issue here is building trust between parties. This is very important. Now, I know that in the progress, the recent progress of the negotiation between the MILF and the government was because of the extra effort of the President Aquino to meet Haji Murad, despite the fact that it had to be in Tokyo. So that's already a signal to the MILF that the government really is sincere in the negotiation. So building trust can be done in many ways. It can be done in the Myanmar way, it can be done in the Philippine way, it can be done in the Indonesian way or whatever it is. But what is important is both parties have to show trust to each other. And then parties should not be afraid of bringing in third-party facilitator. This has been already explained by Dr. Tangko this morning. It is very important that there will be a third-party facilitator. Our experience with the MILF TPH peace process, from 1997 to year 2000, the negotiations were conducted in the Philippines without a facilitator. But in year 2000, it ended with the government attacking the major camps of the MILF. So with that case, the MILF said, no, we cannot talk anymore unless there is a facilitator. So here I think we have already tried talking, dialoguing without a facilitator, but it did not progress. So in our experiences, there is indeed a need for a third-party facilitator. As earlier discussed this morning, while talking peace, ceasefire is significant to keep the peace process going and to preserve whatever gains achieved. It provides a space to build confidence among conflicting parties. It is very difficult to talk while we are fighting. It will be better to talk while the gun are silent. You silence the gun and then begin talking. I think that will be a very good policy. But there are groups, for example, who say, no, we cannot do that, mainly because they feel that government will take advantage. But they have also to take advantage. Both parties will be taking advantage of the ceasefire. So what's the difference? So I think it will be better that while talking peace, there will be a ceasefire, particularly when the conflict is about territorial sovereignty, territorial self-determination. Because when you declare a ceasefire, who benefits? It's your own people. It's your own people. So I think ceasefire is very important. It is also very important that leadership of conflicting parties must be able to rally support for the peace process. The support of influential institutions like the military, Congress, for example, or Parliament, the media, business, civil society, and the religious would strengthen the party's position to search for creative measures in resolving the conflict. Sometimes what hinders parties to come out with a compromise is for fear of, being criticized or being alienated by some sector in society. So it is the support of influential groups are very important in the negotiations. Now, without necessarily abandoning the bargaining method in negotiation, proposals should be framed as a problem-solving method. The traditional way of negotiation is in a zero-sum approach. I get 10, you lost 10. But armed conflict should be resolved not in that way, but it will be as a problem-solving mechanism. Nobody should lose, everybody will gain. So in framing proposals, both sides' proposals, the approach should be on a problem-solving method. And it is also very important that parties in the negotiation should conduct regular consultations with stakeholders. I think as far as the GPH MILF peace process is concerned, this is the only process I know in the world that had conducted so many consultations. And it is open. As Dr. Tempo has explained this morning, the issues are open to everybody. Nobody, no agenda item which is kept secret to anybody. But of course, the discussions, the details of discussions are not sometimes may not be open because that's in a different level. But as far as issues is concerned, it has to be open. I know that both the MILF in its website, the Luaran, and the Office of the Presidential Assistant of the Peace Process are always uploading the progress of the information on their respective websites immediately after the negotiations, or sometimes even during the negotiation. That's how open the peace process was. And then bring in also representatives of minority groups in the area, in the conflict affected areas. In the case of the MILF and Philippine government, they see to it that there is always a representation from minority groups. At one time, one member of the MILF peace panel was a Christian from Iligan, but he has to resign when he was appointed as a judge. and then seek the assistance of experts on some issues that may be very difficult for the two panels to tackle. One example is when the issue of policing arose, and this that's a very technical issue. So what panel did was to create an independent commission on policing, composed of both international and local experts. And they come out with recommendations which is submitted to the panel for consideration. And it gives us, it was a very helpful exercise. And on the issue of transitional justice, what shall we do with the massacres? What shall we do with the human rights violations? These are sensitive issues, which I think we have to admit that on the level of the members of the panel, we may not have the expertise to address that. So what the panels did was to create a Transitional Justice and Reconciliation Commission headed by a Swiss expert with government and MILF experts sitting on the commission. And now they are almost ready with their studies, and you maybe submit their recommendations later on. Now, sometimes, negotiations, our experience, or the MILF negotiations, it took around 70 years. So even if negotiations drag on for a long time, we still have to encourage parties to keep talking. Because if we stop talking, the gun will start talking. And which is better? For the mouth to talk or for the gun to talk? I think it will be better for the mouth to talk, even how noisy it is. But the danger really in a long-drawn peace talks is negotiation fatigue. That's the danger. If people do not see any result. So that's why it is important that whatever agreement reached, even how small, should be implemented so that people can see the result. Now, on our experience is, in order for people would say that the negotiations is going on, the panels created the Bangsamoro Development Agency as a development arm of the MILF. So we implemented that. The BDA is functioning well, handling development programs. Now, this is another case. In some areas, armed insurgents, armed groups would not allow development programs to happen. But in the case of the MILF would encourage development programs being implemented even in its own camps. Because the argument is, if we are fighting for our people, then why could not we allow development programs which are intended for our own people? So that's, I think, the logic there. But some armed groups would say, well, these are anti-insurgency programs. It may be an anti-insurgency programs, but if it is for the good of your people, and you have confidence of the loyalty of your people, then I think there's nothing wrong. That's why ceasefire agreements and return, whatever agreements reached, even how small, should be implemented. Agreements on ceasefire and return and rehabilitation of evacuees, for example, are important steps that have to be undertaken before or simultaneous with discussion on substantive issues. Now, in the process of talking, even how long, we cannot deny that there are some agreements reached. On our experience, the agreements signed between the government and the MILF are now in are already in 2 volumes. I think in 2010 we have already published 1 volume of documents as thick as this, and coming soon will be the next volume, which is also as thick as this. And in that document, there are things that we don't want to lose. We don't want to lose what we have really achieved, because it is very difficult to negotiate. So whatever agreements being reached, and this is already achieved, this achievement in peace process, we have to preserve that. And in order to preserve what have been achieved in the peace process, it is very important to put up the peace infrastructure. Now, in our experience, there are 2 kinds of peace infrastructures. One is on the political level or in the negotiation level, and one is in the security or the ceasefire level. Now, in the negotiations, we have the International Contact Group, which was explained earlier to us by Dr. Tengku. This is a very important infrastructure, because the role of the ICG is not only to observe, but even assess the facilitator in, finding ways to come up with an agreement. I know by experience that sometimes we have to ask the ICG to look for a better term or to help us draft an agreement or so as. So it's indeed very helpful. Now, as explained earlier, this is a unique approach because we have both members coming from government as well as international NGOs. Why international NGOs? Because there are things which government cannot do because of certain policy, and it will be the international NGOs can do that, and it is indeed very helpful. So this is an experience I think we can share with other peace processes, that we have to be creative in our approach, because combining government and international NGO in one group is, I think, a very innovative approach. Now, on the security side, is we have to preserve the gains in the ceasefire. Because if we keep on talking and then there will also be continuing fighting in the field, then I think it will be very difficult. To do that, the infrastructures are the local monitoring team, the LMT, that is in the local level, the coordinating committee on the cessation of hostilities. Now, in this CCCH, there are 2 committees, the committee of the MILF and committee of the government, but they are not but they coordinate their activities. Now, to address other, terrorism and other lawless elements, we created the ad hoc joint action group. And this is a group combined effort of the MILF and the government to address, other criminal groups. And then we have the international monitoring team was created, in order to oversee that the ceasefire is being observed and implemented. Now, after an agreement is signed, what can be done? we cannot just leave the agreement there. So after an agreement is signed, it is important to have a roadmap of implementation and benchmark to guide parties to the agreement, third parties, intervener, and funding institutions in implementing the agreement. So here is one of the annexes in the framework agreement on the Bangsamoro is the annex on transitional mechanism. This would define the roadmap. After the signing of the agreement, up to its implementation, we have defined the roadmap. This is very important because as of now, we got a problem in the implementation of the agreement because the proposed Bangsamoro Basic Law is still pending in Congress and there is a slim chance of being implemented. I think if without this roadmap, this would be very difficult to control. So I think the roadmap that we have drawn is still helpful in order to say that this is what is not implemented, this is being implemented. Even in the implementation of the normalization process, we still have the roadmap. So, after we signed the agreement, we did not disband the peace panel. Although we are not meeting regularly, but we are still there. Because once a problem will crop up, then who shall address the problem? It should be the peace panel. And we keep all the peace process infrastructures intact. The CCH, the IMT, AJAC, and so on are there intact. Now, and then it is also very important that we establish, monitor, and implementation of the peace process. That's why we have the third-party monitoring team to see to it that that the agreements are being implemented. Now, in conceptualizing creative approaches to a conflict situation, it is useful to learn from the experiences of others. But in considering the lessons learned from the negotiations between the Philippine government and the Islamic Liberation Front, caution has to be taken because not all of these lessons might be relevant to every conflict, or every conflict possesses its own distinctive characteristics. Every conflict has its own history, context, issues, and intensity. The approach and process to address them must be responsive to the circumstances. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abhoud, for comprehensive presentation on the MLF in Bangsamoro, in Mindanao. One thing that I think would conclude, if I have to conclude, is that the role, after I listen to Janan, I have the impression that the role of peace practitioner is difficult. And Dr. Abhoud has integrated his two roles as scholar and practitioner successfully, I think, so applaud to that. There are many points to discuss or debate, contrasts and commonalities, differences. I would open up to the floor for Q&A.